I'm Dylan Bryan, 16 years old, grade 10, and finally, thank God, it's my last year of high school. Most people celebrate their senior year like it's some kind of golden age, but for me, it was just the end of a long, miserable road. When I was 14, they slapped me with a diagnosis. Disabilities, they called it. Whatever that's supposed to mean. From that day, the world seemed to shrink. Teachers treated me like glass, students like I was some alien. The start of grade 10 felt like someone flipped a switch. Everyone was different. People started mouthing off to me, throwing those fake smiles or side comments when they thought I wouldn't hear. I always did. And I snapped back, loud, angry, cussing like hell. I'd been bullied in primary school, torn apart by kids who saw me as weaker. I swore I'd never let that happen again. Never. Guys acted like total idiots. Girls, I'll be civil and just say they were brats. 5% of us were decent human beings. Maybe. The rest, useless, loud, reckless. I kept to myself mostly, didn't care much for being liked. Still, I wasn't alone. I had two good mates, true mates, the kind you trust even if the sky falls down. We met years ago, and even now, though we were in different classes, they stuck with me. Only thing keeping me sane some days. That morning was dragging like every other. The lesson was boring, the teacher was droning, and I was counting down the minutes to lunch. I stared at the clock like it owed me money, just praying it would tick faster. I shifted in my seat, muttered curses under my breath, and watched the minute hand crawl. That's when it happened. Ding, dang, dong, the PA system. My brain immediately checked out. Probably the principal rattling off about hand sanitizer or some fundraiser no one cared about. His voice came through, dull as ever. But then, he said something else. Code black. I frowned. What the hell are you on about? I muttered, scoffing. But then I looked up. The code sheet was right next to the whiteboard. I scanned it. Code black. Lockdown. Wait. Lockdown? Suddenly, I wasn't bored anymore. My teacher jolted into action. She locked the door, grabbed a massive sheet of paper and taped it over the glass window, then rushed to pull the curtains shut. I saw a few other teachers outside in the hallway, hurrying toward the foyer, locking the outer doors and covering windows. It was fast, serious. Like they knew something we didn't. Our grade block was shaped like a big circle, 5 classrooms that opened into a wide, round foyer. The kind of place with couches, where we usually joked around during breaks. 2 doors at either end of the foyer led straight outside. Now, it all felt vulnerable. Suddenly, the school fell dead silent. No footsteps, no hallway chatter, just nothing. Our class was pitch black, a strange, cold kind of dark. I could still make out some faces in the faint light, but no one looked scared, just confused, bored, unimpressed. The silence was weird, though. Real weird. I wasn't scared. I don't get scared. But I'd be lying if I said the air didn't feel thick, like it was pressing down on us. You could have heard a pin drop. Every second passed like it was holding its breath. This wasn't some stupid fire drill. Where I live, nothing bad ever happens. Peaceful place, quiet state, over 600,000 people and no real trouble in the schools. Ever. We'd done fire drills, sure, but lockdowns? Never. I sat on a bench at the back. That was my spot, out of the way. I've always been the quiet one, the odd one. I don't mix well with people, not since the diagnosis. It's easier not to. Still, I couldn't help but listen harder now. Was something happening? Was there someone out there? I didn't know. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't bored. I was alert, curious, and deep down, somewhere I don't let anyone see, I was ready. The moment the principal said, "Code black," something shifted. It wasn't panic, not yet. It was confusion wrapped in disbelief. His voice didn't match the seriousness of the words he was saying. Calm, almost bored, like he was reading the lunch menu. I stared at the speaker in the ceiling, wondering if he even knew what code black meant. I glanced to the side of the whiteboard where the emergency codes were posted. Code black equals lockdown. That word made me sit up straighter. My amusement didn't last long. My teacher, Miss Carter, moved so fast it startled me. She reached the door, locked it with a loud click, and grabbed a massive sheet of butcher paper from under her desk. She slapped it over the narrow glass pane in the door like it was second nature. Her hands shook slightly as she drew the curtains across the windows, cutting out the light, plunging us into shadow. The sound of other classroom doors slamming shut echoed faintly from the foyer. I heard hurried footsteps, teachers locking both external doors at each end of the grade block. Then the curtains out there were drawn too. The light in the big round foyer, always bright and buzzing, suddenly dimmed into silence and shadow. Our school's layout was simple. Too simple, if you ask me. 5 classrooms branching off a huge circular foyer. That foyer was meant to be a relaxing zone for students, with 4 soft couches arranged in a square and open space in the center. But the place always felt too open, too exposed. 2 big exit doors sat at either end, leading straight to the outside world. Anyone could walk in if they wanted. And now we were locked in, like animals in a glass cage. The air inside our classroom started to change. You could feel it, like pressure building up, the kind that makes your skin feel too tight. I sat in my usual spot, on the bench near the back wall, away from everyone. That's how I preferred it. I'd learned to keep my distance. Ever since they slapped that disabled label on me, people either treated me like I was breakable or completely ignored me. So I stayed in my own bubble. It was safer that way. No one said a word, not even the loudmouths. It was eerie. Our class, normally noisy with groans, laughter, dumb jokes, dead silent, like someone pressed mute on the whole room. I could still make out a few shapes in the darkness. People slumped at their desks, resting their heads in their arms, texting under the table, probably assuming it was all fake. A drill. Some weird joke. But something about it didn't feel like a drill. The principal's voice had no urgency, but the teachers moved too fast. They knew something. Something they weren't telling us. The curtains, the doors, the sudden silence. It all felt so final. We were sealed in. Trapped. And yet, no one really reacted. There were no screams, no cries. Not yet. Just a growing sense that something was wrong. I leaned back against the wall, staring into the thick darkness. The blinds were shut tight. No way to see out. That's when it hit me. We didn't know what we were hiding from, and that's what made it worse. I sat in the dark, legs stretched out along the bench, back against the wall, and my eyes glued to nothing. Just blackness. Not pitch black, but that weird, heavy kind of dark that feels like it's pressing on your skin. The kind that makes even the slightest movement look like a shadow crawling across the floor. And as much as I tried to act like I didn't care, my gut knew. This wasn't a drill. We never did lockdowns before. Fire drills, sure, once or twice a year, with the same slow shuffle to the oval. But this? There'd been no warning, no heads up from the teachers. Nothing. That principal's calm, robotic voice didn't sit right either. If this was real, shouldn't he have sounded, I don't know, alarmed? Not like he was reading from a damn cereal box. Still, my teacher jumped like it was real. She reacted instantly, and fast. That kind of panic doesn't come from practice. It comes from fear. Something had triggered this. Something serious enough to lock an entire school down in the middle of the day. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and stared into the half-dark. My ears strained, searching for anything. A thud, a scream, footsteps, even a voice. But there was nothing, not even a creak in the walls. Then my brain started running in circles. Was someone inside the school? Were they armed? Was it a student? A stranger? Was anyone hurt already? Were we next? The questions came like bullets. I looked around at my classmates, barely moving shadows at their desks. Some had their heads down, others were texting on their phones under the desk, like it was just another excuse to not do math. A few exchanged bored glances. One girl even looked like she was about to fall asleep. No one looked scared. No one but me. And I don't mean terrified. I wasn't shaking or anything. But there was this strange heat rising in my chest, like I was being pulled between 2 feelings at once. Half of me was on edge, imagining every possible worst-case scenario. The other half was angry, furious that I didn't know what was going on. I'd lived my whole life in a quiet, nothing-ever-happens kind of place. Our town was the kind you see on postcards. Peaceful, green, smiling families, dogs on leashes, community barbecues. I knew every street like the back of my hand. We had one high school, 2 supermarkets, and a bowling alley that hadn't updated its arcade games since 1999. Trouble didn't happen here. So why now? Why this? I rubbed my hands together slowly, the skin of my palms sweating a little. The silence was getting to me. It was too quiet, like the school itself was holding its breath. Every now and then, someone in the room would fidget, a chair would creak, or a shoe would squeak on the linoleum. And it was like a firecracker going off. My heart would leap, my jaw would tighten, and I'd scan the room like I was preparing for a fight. Because deep down, even if no one else saw it, I was a fighter. I didn't care if someone had a knife or a bat or whatever. I could handle myself. Years of being picked on, cornered, insulted. They shaped me into something sharper, stronger. I kept that part of me buried, but it was there. And if this turned into something real, something violent, I wouldn't freeze. But that's what made it worse. Because if this was real, I'd have to use it. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know what that would look like. Time crawled. It wasn't just slow. It stopped. Minutes felt like hours, and I swear I could hear the tick of the second hand echoing in my skull. No sounds outside the classroom, no update from the principal, just silence. And the longer it stretched, the heavier it got. At first, it was almost peaceful, but peace turned to pressure, the kind that builds in your chest and doesn't let go. Everyone just sat there. No one asked questions. No one moved much. A few students texted quietly under their desks, but no one dared to talk out loud. Even the teacher looked frozen, eyes flicking to the door every few seconds like she expected it to burst open. The air was thick, stagnant, like it had been trapped in here for days. My back was aching against the wall, but I didn't move. Didn't want to. Moving might make a sound. And suddenly, sound felt dangerous. That's when my mind started spiraling. What if there's someone in the school with a weapon? What if the principal's already hurt and we're just sitting ducks? What if this isn't a lockdown, it's a trap? I stared at the paper-covered window on the door. Just a flimsy barrier between us and whatever was out there. I imagined someone standing on the other side, breathing, listening, waiting for the right moment to kick the door open. I wasn't scared of them, not really. If someone came through that door, I'd fight. Dirty, no hesitation. I wasn't one of those freeze-in-fear types. I've been through worse. But that didn't stop the tension from building. I felt it in my shoulders, my jaw, my fists clenched on my lap. The worst part? No one knew anything. We were blind and mute, locked in a cage without explanation. My imagination took off. What if it wasn't just one attacker? What if it was a group? What if someone smuggled a weapon in their backpack and snapped? What if the lockdown wasn't for protection? It was to trap them inside, with us. I kept scanning the room. The kids at their desks looked annoyed, not scared. Maybe they were too dumb to realize how serious this could be. Or maybe they were in denial, like none of it could touch them. But I felt it. I knew something was wrong. My fingers twitched. My muscles were ready. If anyone came in, I wouldn't run. I'd swing first. But the silence just dragged on. A cough made everyone flinch. Someone whispered something and was instantly hushed. Even the sound of a pencil dropping made hearts skip. We were prisoners, not of a person, but of the unknown. And whatever was waiting outside, it was still waiting. We were all still frozen in place when it happened. It was faint. So faint I almost thought I imagined it. A shuffle, a thud, maybe a footstep. Whatever it was, it came from the hallway, just outside our door. My heart thumped hard in my chest, the first real jolt of adrenaline I'd felt all day. My ears perked like a predator sensing something nearby. I leaned forward, trying to catch it again. Everyone else must have heard it too, because the entire class went rigid. Still no talking, no movement, just eyes, wide and darting. Then came another sound. This one softer, like a whisper, or a sob. I couldn't tell. We all froze, worse than before. Even the teacher went still like she'd turned to stone. That paper over the window. It suddenly felt like a joke. Just a thin sheet between us and whatever was out there. I found myself staring at it, waiting for something, someone, to punch through. But nothing happened. The sound vanished as quickly as it came. That's the thing about fear. It doesn't need proof. It only needs suggestion. And now it had us. I started imagining it. Someone creeping room to room, checking doors, peeking through covered windows, hunting. Not saying a word, just listening. Maybe even smiling. That's when the girl sitting 3 rows in front of me started crying. Quietly. Her shoulders shook, and she pulled her phone closer to her chest like it was some kind of shield. "I saw something," she whispered to the girl beside her. "On my phone. There's a violent incident. Someone said there's a weapon." That was it. The fear that had been slithering under our skin all this time. It sank in deep. We weren't paranoid anymore. We weren't imagining the danger. It was real. And the principal? Still no word. No update. Not even a confirmation that we were safe. Why the silence? Was he being forced to keep quiet? Was he even still in the office? My eyes snapped back to the door. That stupid paper. And that's when I saw it. A shadow. Just for a second. A flicker. Movement that passed right across the door window. It was there, and then gone. No one else seemed to notice. I scanned the others. Nothing. They were too busy listening to their own fears, staring at their desks or their phones. But I saw it. And it wasn't a teacher. It wasn't normal. It was like something waiting to be let in. And for the first time since this started, I didn't want to be tough. I just wanted it all to end. Time had stretched so thin it felt like we were trapped in some limbo between moments. And just when the silence had nearly become normal, just when the air was thick enough to choke on, I heard something. It was subtle. So faint I might have brushed it off if my nerves weren't wired like tripwires. A soft sound, like a shoe scuffing the floor outside. A shuffle. Then nothing. I held my breath, frozen. Eyes locked on the paper-covered window of the classroom door. I wasn't the only one who noticed. The class went still like a switch had been flipped. You could almost hear hearts pounding in the dark. Then came another sound. Quieter. Stranger. A whisper, maybe, or someone crying. I couldn't tell. I leaned forward, trying to make sense of it. But the moment I moved, the sound vanished like it had never existed. Everyone was alert now. Tense bodies, wide eyes, strained breathing. One of the girls a few desks up started quietly sobbing into her hoodie sleeve, her phone pressed tightly in her hand. I watched her shake, and then she whispered to her friend beside her, just loud enough for me to hear. "There's something on my phone. It says there's a violent incident happening. Like someone brought a weapon." That changed everything. The whispered rumors had turned into a hard, ugly truth. Our fear wasn't paranoia anymore. It was real. My stomach twisted, and I felt the back of my neck go cold. I tried not to react, but my brain lit up like fireworks. Was it happening in another block? Was the person already caught? Were they still inside? Why hadn't the principal said anything else? What if they couldn't? I stared again at the door. That sheet of paper seemed thinner than ever. Useless, like a piece of tissue pretending to be armor. My heart started pounding faster, and that's when I saw it. Just for a second. A flash of something, movement. A shadow gliding across the door window from the hallway. It was so quick, so smooth. I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but I knew what I saw. No one else reacted. Either they didn't see it, or they were too scared to acknowledge it. I waited, eyes locked on the spot, praying I wouldn't see it again. But I also kind of wanted to, because not knowing is worse. I didn't want to sit here like prey. I didn't want to feel helpless. But more than anything, I didn't want to find out what was behind that shadow. And still, there was no announcement, no update, no clue. Just that silence again. Only now, it wasn't empty. It was watching us. The longer we sat in silence, the more unreal everything felt. My legs were numb, my back was stiff against the cold bench, and every breath I took felt like I was inhaling the weight of the room itself. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was suffocating. The air was stale, heavy, like it had been trapped in here for days. Even the usual teenage fidgeting had stopped. No more rustling backpacks, no whispering, no clicking pens. It was like the entire class had been swallowed by the dark and forgotten how to exist. Then came something new, something worse. It started as a faint scent, barely noticeable. At first, I thought maybe someone near me had BO, or maybe a heater had kicked on and started burning dust. But the more I focused on it, the more I realized it wasn't normal. It had a bitter edge to it. Sharp, acrid, burning. It smelled like something was smoldering. Not a fire. Not yet. But something was definitely off. Like the kind of smell that comes just before a full blaze. I looked at my teacher. Miss Carter was biting the edge of her thumbnail, staring at the classroom door like it held all the answers in the world. I waited for her to say something. Anything. But she just sat there, tense, her foot tapping ever so slightly beneath her desk. I think she smelled it too, but she didn't want to scare us. I glanced at the others. One kid scrunched up his nose, sniffed the air, then glanced around like he was waiting for someone else to confirm it. Another kid leaned toward the window and then back again, unsure if opening it would be a violation or a blessing. The silence was unbearable now. Not because it was quiet, but because it felt like something was coming. I kept thinking about that smell. What if something was burning down the hall? What if someone lit a fire to draw people out? Or worse, what if someone was trying to cover up what they'd done with smoke and flame? I tried to keep my breathing even. I told myself to stay calm, but deep down, my fight or flight was itching to break loose. I imagined myself leaping from the bench, unlocking the door, ripping down the paper and bolting into the hallway to see for myself. But then, a colder thought gripped me. What if that's what they wanted? What if the lockdown wasn't just about keeping us safe, but keeping us contained? I stayed seated, fists clenched on my thighs. I kept my eyes on that stupid silent door. The smell grew stronger, just enough to make my throat feel raw and my skin itch. But no alarms went off. No one screamed. There was still nothing. That's what made it worse. The unknown. The waiting. The why behind it all. I wasn't just nervous anymore. I was on the edge of snapping. And still, no one told us a thing. Not the principal. Not the teacher. Not even the damn PA system. We were trapped in a black box of fear, and something outside that box was smoldering. It happened without warning, just like the lockdown had started. The PA system crackled back to life with that familiar electronic buzz, and for the first time in what felt like hours, we heard the principal's voice again. "All clear," he said. That's it. 2 words. No explanation. No apology. Just that same empty, casual tone he always used for morning announcements, like he was telling us it was time for recess or reminding us about hat policy. The class didn't move at first. No one said anything. We all just looked at each other, unsure if it was real, unsure if it was safe. My teacher hesitated, her hand hovering over the lock on the classroom door. You could tell she didn't trust it either. It felt wrong. Too sudden. Too calm. But eventually, she stood and unlocked the door. A sliver of hallway light sliced into the dark classroom like a knife through fog, and that one strip of light felt like a spotlight. We all blinked into it like we were coming out of a bunker. One by one, people got up slowly, still cautious, like we were expecting to see something horrible the second we stepped outside. But there was nothing. No alarms, no police, no bodies, no blood. Just the same hallway we'd walked down that morning, only now it felt foreign, like something had invaded it, or haunted it. Lunchtime had officially started, and the school began to buzz again, but this time it wasn't the usual chaos. It was whispers. Low, urgent, excited whispers that bounced off every wall. I moved through the corridor in a daze, like I was underwater, and all around me students were piecing the story together like detectives trading clues. The rumor? A student had pulled a knife on the principal. No one knew their name. No one knew if they'd gotten into the building armed or if they'd snapped right there in the office. But everyone claimed the same thing. The principal hadn't been hurt. Some kids laughed about it, treating it like a legend already. Others looked shaken. I didn't laugh. I didn't even speak. I just kept thinking about how quiet the lockdown had been. How fake the principal's voice had sounded. How no one had come to check on us. And the shadow I saw outside our classroom door. What was that? If it really was a student with a knife, why hadn't the lockdown felt more chaotic? Why did it feel orchestrated? I walked into the lunch area and spotted my two mates sitting on the edge of the courtyard. They waved me over, cracking jokes and already speculating about what punishment the kid got. Probably expelled, right? One said. Straight to juvie, the other added. I just nodded and stared out across the school grounds. Something wasn't sitting right. That shadow, the smell of burning, the whispering in the hallway, the weird timing, the eerie calm of the principal's voice. It didn't add up. Maybe someone was expelled. Maybe the danger was over. But it didn't feel over. Not to me. I went home that afternoon and dropped my bag by the door without a word. My mom asked how school was, and I just said fine. Then I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't finished, that something had watched us from the other side of the door, something that hadn't needed to get in, because maybe it already had. And that's when it hit me. They said it was a knife. But a knife doesn't make shadows move like that. A knife doesn't smell like fire. And a knife doesn't whisper. Whatever happened that day, whatever they told us, wasn't the truth. And I don't think we were ever meant to know what it really was.